taking the fast to another level. That it's not just leaving the food and water. We're saying, what else can we do? The fast is a platform that allows us to do other things and makes it that much easier. The other thing to consider is that as we're looking at this, one of the goals that we have in Ramadan is that each Ramadan should be better than the previous one. So not just like, okay, because you get to a point in your life where the food and water, that's the easy, right? And I know some people struggle with it, so I don't want to detract from that. Some people really struggle with the food and water. But then you get to a point where you're seasoned. Even like little kids sometimes, they get to the point, if they've been fasting since they were 6 and 7, it gets to a point where it's like, all right, I just skipped breakfast and lunch and had a late dinner, right? Especially now as it's moving into the winter time. So you get seasoned, so it's like, okay, is that where you're going to stop? If you can shoot a 2-pointer every single time, are you going to stop right there, or are you going to go for half court, a 3-pointer? And then once you get that, and you're like, every single time I get a 3-pointer, and then you're going to go to half court, and then maybe from the other end of the side, and then you start doing trick shots, open up a YouTube channel, and then. So we want to make every Ramadan better than the previous one. The other benefit of personalizing your Ramadan is that when we get into a routine, we can actually start worshiping the ibadah. We can actually worship the worship. Think about that for a moment. We can actually start worshiping the worshiping. And Ibn Ata'illah, in his famous book Al-Hikam, the wisdoms, he says one of the signs that we do things for other than the sake of Allah, listen to this, the sign that we're doing an action for other than the sake of Allah is that when we slip on that action, we miss it, or we do something we shouldn't have, that we fall into the state of deep despair. We fall into a state of deep despair. Why? He says because you were depending on your action and not depending on Allah. You were depending on your action and not depending on Allah. And so we don't want to give up the actions. We know that we have to fulfill the outward, but we're not doing the action for the action, and it's so important that we have to get that action. Because we know we're depending on the rahmah of Allah. And I'll give you an example of where you can look for a cue that you might not be doing it for the right reason. So if a person, say for example, their goal is to pray their taraweeh every single rak'ah in the masjid, but they have a family. And you know how hard that is, right? Because somebody's got to sacrifice so that somebody else can go to the family. If you have a family and there's a number of people in the house, can everybody get to the masjid and get all 20 rak'ahs and get back home? Is there any families out there, the super families? If they are, I'd like to eat what they're eating for suhoor. So if a person is going to trample on other people so that they can hit their goals, fall short of fulfilling the rights of other people so that they can hit their goals, they're not doing it for the sake of Allah. We have to balance things out. Okay, now let's go to the next page. Looking at your list, you got your list. Now that's what you want for the entirety of Ramadan. And one of the many, many blessings of Ramadan is that it really it paces our days. The rest of the year, we're kind of like all over the place. Ramadan, you got to eat here, and this is when you don't eat, and this is when you break your fast. It really forces us to get into a pace. This is when you're going to get up. This is when you're going to sleep. You don't have to, but is it fair to say that it puts us in that pacing? It forces us to pace ourselves, and then as a community. So now that was your entire month that you're looking at, and you're going to break it up over Ramadan. So now you're going to look at your page and break those up into what's going to take you 1 to 2 hours, what's going to take you half an hour to 45 minutes daily. This is daily. What's going to take you 10 to 15 minutes, and what's going to take you 3 to 5 minutes. And so just kind of break it up by that. But anyway, you have to just think about you're a guardian, you're at that fortress, you have to be in a constant state of readiness, you're prepared, of vigilance, because something could happen at any moment. And so this is the idea of ribat. And at the end of the end of Ali Imran, right? Inna fi khalq as-samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilaf al-layli wan nahar. That's the end of Ali Imran, right? Yeah. Those last 10 ayahs are what the Prophet ﷺ would recite every night when he would wake up, and he would look at the creation and he would recite those last 10 verses. So it's good to memorize those, like the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, the end of Ali Imran, and recite those at night. And since we're going to be getting up, and I'm going to actually add that in there, make sure that I read that every night, and try to look at the heavens too. So don't just recite them, like peek out the windows and look at the heavens, and then recite the end of Ali Imran, the last 10 verses. And the last verse of that is Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sabiru wa sabiru wa rabitu wa taqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. O you who believe, have patience, have musabara, which is facing your difficulties, musabara, and do ribat, which is maintain this fortress, and have taqwa of Allah. Those four things. And so the scholars have said that state of murabata, of being on that fortress with yourself, are these 6 things. And they all start with mim, in English M, so I call them the 6 M's of murabata, a model of behavioral change. So the first one is musharata, which comes from the Arabic word shart, or condition. So you're putting your goal setting. Now these are on the daily basis. So now you're going to take your monthly overall plan, and now you're going to do this on a daily basis. The preferred time to do this is at the beginning of the day, usually after Fajr. Again, there's not a specific time to do it, but after Fajr. Since we're in the month of Ramadan, and now we're forcing ourselves to get up at the end of the night, if we're not in a habit of doing tahajjud every single night, well now we're up at the time of tahajjud because we're going to eat and make our fast that much easier on us. So we're forcing ourselves to get up at that time. So after you're done eating, and while you're waiting, that time in between suhoor and fajr, so that's another goal. Don't eat suhoor all the way up until fajr, because 2 things are going to happen. One, you're going to get into that whole debate of 18 degrees, 12 degrees, 15 degrees. That fiqh debate of when does fajr come in? It's better what I advise people is stop eating at the early time and pray after the later time. And then that'll give you about a good 15 or 20 minutes so that you can do the sunnahs where the Prophet ﷺ would wait in between eating and fajr. And you can do things like this. You can pull out your log and say, okay, today what am I going to do? I have my monthly goal, but today what is my monthly goal? And when you're setting those goals, there's 4 areas that you're thinking of. Staying away from the haram and the makruh, the prohibited and the disliked. Both of those things, not just the haram, we're staying away from the prohibited and the disliked things. And we're performing the fard and we're performing the sunnah. We're performing obligatory things and sunnah. So those are the 4 that we look at. Of the 5 rulings of Islam, because everything falls into 5 rulings. It's either fard, sunnah, makruh, haram, or what? Mubah, permissible. But you see that it's not in there. Because for the person who's being serious about their faith, you're staying away from even the permissible things. But how are you staying away from the permissible things? Through intention. So instead of just drinking a glass of water, you make the intention, I'm doing this to keep my body healthy and alive. Bismillah. Now you get the reward of a fard. When you stay away from the haram, you stay away from the haram with an intention. When you go to sleep, you make the intention, I'm going to sleep because my body needs it. And especially in Ramadan, you need to say like, okay, I need to do all of these things, but I need to take a nap. I might need to take a nap, or I need to get some sleep, because you could, like you said, Layla, you could pursue things aggressively, right? Because everybody knows what happens. You guys call it post call, right? In the medical field, post call. What about post qiyam? What does your post qiyam day look like? We know what the post qiyam day looks like because your body needs to recharge. Like, okay, you're not going to give me sleep. I'm going to take it from you. And so you keep that in mind. Like, oh, all right, I'm going to give my body sleep. I'm going to give it food. I'm going to give it water. I'm going to give it a break, even from worship, because I don't have to constantly be in a state of worship. I'm going to do some permissible something just to kind of like give me relax, like some self-care. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a young Sahaba and a Sahabi companion, and a scholar even from a young age, and he was called by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Hibr, the scholar of this ummah. In his majalis, in his gatherings of ilm, every once in a while he would stop and he would say, bring the poetry. Let's just recite some poetry. Just kind of like, now let's take a break. So you do have to put that in there too. Like, how are we going to take a break? But you're staying away from the haram, the makruh, performing the fard and the sunnah. Really quickly, you know, when you think about your optimum Ramadan, we also have to look at, did I include all four of those things in there? Because usually when we think about prepare for Ramadan, we're just thinking about the worship and the ibadah and the fard and the sunnah of it. But are we including the other things as well? Staying away from the haram, staying away from things that are makruh, working on relationships with people, bettering our relationships with people. So we set the goals at the beginning of the day. Then there's mujahada. Mujahada is that you're exerting your strength. You're working your best, and you're making sure, like, okay, I'm going to start my day and I'm going to do my best. And so, like the story that you mentioned earlier, the person who got to 10 a.m. with a full fast, and then somebody to dhuhr with a full fast. And we know that. We know when we're at our best, and we know when we fall short. But we just constantly, we're trying to exert ourselves, to do mujahada. And then at the end of the day, you do what's called a muhasaba, a self-evaluation. Now you look at yourself. So you can have a journal, a 30-day journal. It doesn't have to be a template. And start out at the beginning of every day. Set your goals. Throughout the day, you're striving. Also throughout the day, you're monitoring yourself. You're policing yourself. And then at the end of the day, you do a muhasaba. And so usually you can do this after Asr. After Asr is a good time too, or maybe even after, in the evening in Ramadan. Wherever you can break away and find 5 to 10 minutes just to evaluate yourself on that day. How did I do? And give yourself, you could even do a grading score, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10 on each of those items. How well did I do on this? How well did I do? And then after you self-evaluate, you do the muhasaba. And this also comes from a hadith. Take yourselves to account before you're taking to account. Hasibu anfusakum, like take yourselves to account. And then once you got that, then there's a mu'aqaba and the mu'ataba. The mu'aqaba is where you give yourself a consequence. And the mu'ataba is where you self-reprimand. The mu'aqaba, though, it has to be mentioned that it can only be something that's in line with the Islamic law, with Sharia. You can't do something, you can't punish yourself with something that would be haram. So you would do something like Imam al-Ghazali mentions, if you did a sin with your eyes, well then take your eyes away from something that it likes to look at. So if there was something you like to watch, you can't watch that anymore. No privileges for you. You lose your privileges, but you're doing this to yourself. Or somebody ate something haram, and so the consequence would be you're not going to get that treat. You have to almost treat yourself like a parent would to their child. Or maybe you do something haram and you don't get that cup of coffee. If you really like coffee like I do, right? Punish yourself with, you're going to skip coffee. You get a consequence, your decision. So you do a consequence, and everybody knows what, actually I was speaking with one of my students who was in prison, and he said, what did he do? Oh, he really liked a TV show, but then he had given himself a goal, and he fell short on that goal. And he said, well, you're not watching that show tonight. And he said, actually, you're not watching that show until you get that as a habit. And guess what happened? He said he got it as a habit really quickly. But he did it to himself. And you have to stick to that, to the limits. And then the mu'ataba is the self-reprimand, where you reprimand yourself for that action. So these are the 6 M's of murabata. Like Shaykh Muhammad Mawlud says in the Matharat al-Qulub, urabat al-nafsa bi sittin. Do ribat of your nafs with these 6 things.